The crystal decanter slipped from my hand and shattered across the marble floor, red wine spreading between my shoes like something bleeding out. Serena didn't flinch. She stood across the kitchen island in silk and diamonds, calm, too calm, like she had rehearsed this moment. "So here's the deal, you scoundrel," she said evenly. "You will leave your $1,540,000 inheritance to my dad and transfer this apartment to my sister. Or we divorce. A creep like you wouldn't be needed by anyone but me." My name is Ethan Cole, and that was the exact second I realized my marriage had never been about love. It had been about acquisition. For 2 years I tolerated the subtle digs. Her father calling my inheritance lucky money. Her sister joking that I married into structure because I lacked it. Family dinners where I was reminded, politely, that pedigree mattered more than portfolio. I let them underestimate me. That part was deliberate. Serena thought I was emotionally attached to the money. She thought my inheritance was exposed, transferable, vulnerable. She had never asked why it sat inside a protected structure. She had never wondered why her father's company quietly stabilized the year after I took his advice and invested. I bent down, picked up a shard of glass and set it carefully on the counter. "Divorce?" I asked quietly. She smiled. She believed she was negotiating from power. She had no idea she was standing inside something I had built long before she ever tried to tear it down. Serena walked around the island slowly, like she was closing a deal. "Don't make this dramatic, Ethan," she said, pouring herself another glass. "Dad helped you structure that inheritance. Without him, you'd still be sitting on cash earning nothing. That was the narrative they preferred, that I needed them." I didn't argue. I had learned something early in life. People reveal the most when they believe you're weaker. "You're overestimating your position," she continued. "The prenup protects my family. If this turns ugly, you'll spend years in court while Dad's legal team buries you in motions." There it was. Not emotion. Strategy. For 2 years, I'd watched her father study me at dinners, asking subtle questions about liquidity, about trust structures, about risk tolerance. I thought it was curiosity. It wasn't. It was assessment. Serena leaned closer. "Transfer the assets voluntarily and I'll make sure the divorce looks clean. Refuse and you'll regret it." I looked at her carefully. "You think my inheritance is the only leverage here?" I asked. "It's the only one that matters." That made me smile just slightly. 2 years ago, when her father's development firm was suffocating under short-term debt, I followed his advice and invested quietly. Not personally. Strategically. Through layered entities he never traced. "You should call your dad," I said calmly. Serena frowned. "Why?" "Because if you're about to threaten me with legal warfare," I replied, "he deserves to know who he's actually negotiating against." For the first time that night, she hesitated. Serena stared at me for a long moment, trying to decide whether I was bluffing. "You're not that strategic, Ethan," she said finally, though her voice had lost some of its edge. "You don't even like confrontation." That part was true. I don't like noise. I don't like drama. I prefer numbers, quiet, predictable, honest. But silence isn't weakness. It's positioning. "Call him," I repeated. She rolled her eyes but dialed anyway, putting the phone on speaker as if to prove I was ridiculous. Victor Monroe answered on the second ring. "Serena?" "Dad, quick question," she said lightly. "Who owns Westbridge Holdings?" There was a pause. "Why are you asking about Westbridge?" he replied carefully. "Just answer." Another pause. Longer this time. "They're a private capital group. 48% of Monroe Development. Institutional money." "Why?" I held her gaze. "Ask him who controls it." Serena swallowed but obeyed. "Who controls Westbridge?" Silence. Real silence. "That information isn't public," Victor said slowly. "It is to me," I said clearly enough for him to hear. "Because I structured it." Serena's head snapped toward me. Victor's tone changed. "Ethan, what are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything," I replied calmly. "I'm stating a fact. The largest private shareholder in your company isn't institutional." Another pause. "It's me." Serena's fingers tightened around the phone. "That's impossible," she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. "It's documented." For the first time since the decanter shattered. Neither of them sounded certain anymore. Victor didn't respond immediately. When he did, the authority was thinner. "That's not possible," he said slowly. "Westbridge was vetted through 3 layers of private capital." "Correct," I replied calmly. 3 layers I created. Serena stepped back like I had physically moved toward her. You're lying, she said. No, I answered. 2 years ago, when Monroe Development couldn't refinance its short-term debt, you secured emergency capital through Westbridge. You assumed it was private equity. It wasn't. Victor's breathing shifted. Not denial. Recognition. You were advised, he said sharply. You don't have the background to structure something like that. I built my first financial model at 19, I said evenly. You just never asked. Serena shook her head. Dad would have known. He didn't, I replied. Because he never believed I was worth investigating. Silence. Then Victor asked the only question that mattered. How much? 48%, I said. Voting aligned with 2 institutional holders who are tired of your overleveraged expansion. The word overleveraged hit harder than an insult. Serena's confidence cracked visibly. You're threatening my father? No, I said calmly. I'm correcting the power imbalance you tried to weaponize. Victor's voice dropped completely. What do you want, Ethan? There it was. The shift. Not domination. Negotiation. I glanced at Serena, who no longer looked like she was holding leverage. I want clarity, I said quietly. And we're not done discussing the prenup. Serena's composure slipped. Prenup, she echoed. Yes, I said, picking up my briefcase. Clause 17. I opened the Navy folder slowly, deliberately. Serena's eyes followed every movement. You were the one who insisted on that prenup, I reminded her calmly. Your father's legal team drafted it. I signed without hesitation. Which means you walk away with your inheritance, she shot back. Not ours. Read Clause 17. She flipped to the page. At first she looked irritated, then confused, then very still. Clause 17. Any attempt by either party to coerce, manipulate, or compel the transfer of protected assets under threat of marital dissolution constitutes material breach and triggers immediate forfeiture of marital claims, along with financial penalties payable to the non-breaching party. Serena's throat tightened. Victor spoke through the phone. That clause was standard. It wasn't, I interrupted. My attorney added that language. Your firm approved it. Serena looked at me like she was recalculating everything. You recorded this, she said slowly. Yes. The kitchen security system her father insisted we install archived encrypted audio. She had just demanded asset transfer under threat of divorce. Legally? That was coercion. You set this up, she whispered. No, I said quietly. I prepared for it. Victor's tone shifted completely. Ethan, let's not escalate this. Escalate? I asked calmly. You tried to corner me into surrendering assets under legal threat. Serena's confidence was gone now. What do you want? Victor asked. I closed the folder. I want respect, I said evenly. And we renegotiate from reality. For the first time since this started, they weren't speaking down to me. They were speaking carefully. The kitchen felt smaller now. Same marble. Same glass cabinets. Different balance of power. Victor cleared his throat on the speaker. Ethan, no one intended coercion. Serena was emotional. That word again. Emotional. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. She outlined terms. Asset transfer in exchange for avoiding divorce litigation. That's not emotion. That's leverage. Serena didn't interrupt this time. Victor's voice softened. Strategic recalibration. What exactly are you asking for? Not an apology. Not yet. First, I said calmly, a written acknowledgement of my shareholder position in Monroe Development. Silence. Second, I continued, a board restructuring under professional governance. No more expansion driven by ego. Serena stared at me like she was seeing a version she had never bothered to understand. And third, a formal amendment to the prenup removing language that allows implied financial intimidation through extended litigation. Victor inhaled sharply. You're rewriting the balance. No, I corrected. I'm establishing one. Serena finally spoke. If we refuse? I didn't raise my voice. Then on Monday I call an emergency governance review. 48% carries weight. And markets react to instability. That landed. Victor knew what that meant. Investors panic. Credit tightens. Reputation cracks. He exhaled slowly. You're willing to damage the company? I'm willing to protect myself, I replied. Damage only happens when arrogance refuses correction. Serena looked down at the shattered wine stains still visible in the grout. 2 years of slow underestimation. 1 night of clarity. Victor spoke again, quieter now. And if we agree? I met Serena's eyes. Then we rebuild this properly. Not fear. Not dominance. Respect. Victor arrived the next morning without the tailored suit. No cufflinks. No performance. Just a man in a gray sweater standing at my door. Serena sat beside me at the dining table, not across. That detail mattered. Victor didn't speak immediately. He looked at me carefully like he was finally evaluating the right data set. I underestimated you, he said. Not defensive. Not strategic. Just factual. Serena swallowed. I built Monroe Development on control, Victor continued. If I controlled the numbers, I controlled the outcome. I applied that thinking to my daughter's marriage. Serena's eyes dropped. I thought pressure was protection, he admitted. It wasn't. I let the silence breathe. Power isn't proven by interrupting it. Serena finally spoke. I thought you needed us, she said quietly. I thought without structure, without my family's backing, you'd collapse. That was your mistake, I said calmly. I never needed saving. I needed partnership. Victor nodded slowly. The board amendment will move forward. Governance restructuring begins next quarter. And the prenup language will be revised. Not generous. Corrective. Serena turned to me. And us. There it was. The only question that mattered. I looked at her, not as an opponent, not as leverage, but as the woman I had chosen before numbers ever entered the equation. We decide that, I said evenly. Without threats. Without contracts. Victor stood. Smaller than he'd ever looked. Respect, he said quietly. You have it. For the first time in 2 years. It wasn't conditional. The board meeting happened 3 days later. No theatrics. No shouting. Just numbers, clean and undeniable. Governance restructuring passed with 72% approval. Monroe Development shifted from ego-driven expansion to disciplined growth. Credit stabilized. Analysts called it a mature correction. Victor remained on the board. Under oversight. That part mattered. Serena and I sat in our living room that evening. No marble, no tension, just quiet. I was wrong, she said finally. Not defensive. Not strategic. I confused control with security. I studied her carefully. Trust doesn't return because someone says the right words. It returns because patterns change. I tolerated it, I admitted. I thought endurance proved strength. It doesn't. Boundaries do. She nodded slowly. No more leverage, she said. No more silence, I replied. We amended the prenup the following week. Balanced language. No intimidation clauses disguised as protection. Victor came to dinner 2 Fridays later. No dominance. No subtle assessments. Just conversation. Respect is quieter than power. The wine stain in the marble never fully disappeared. I chose not to replace the tile. A reminder. Because that night wasn't about money. It was about assumption. Serena believed my inheritance was my vulnerability. Her father believed influence meant control. They both forgot something simple. The most dangerous person in any room isn't the loudest. It's the one who already prepared for the moment everyone else thought would break him. My name is Ethan Cole. They tried to corner me with divorce. They didn't realize I owned the exit.